So as of today, recording this, Frierin's second season is officially fully aired. And literally the day they released this 10th episode, they announced season 3, which we'll be getting in October of 2027. There's a couple moving parts like the 10 episodes they chose to do for season 2 and the immediate announcement following the finale that indicate answers to a lot of important questions I had coming into the second season. It was a shock when it was first announced, so brief in comparison to the long first season, but in retrospect I think it makes a lot of sense and also indicates a couple big things. Welcome to season 2 of Exploring Frieren. My name is Pei and today we're talking about what all of this might mean. When season 1 of Frieren Beyond Journey's End was released, we saw a pretty immediate and drastic impact on anime. And obviously, given my channel and history, I believe the overwhelmingly positive reception existed for good reason. Frieren did something very well that happened to also be very unique, telling a story that feels drastically different than a lot of what we've experienced before. But with season 2 coming along with some pretty drastic changes behind the scenes and a much more reduced season, there were lots of people, me included, that were concerned. Great shows have fallen apart with significantly less pressure. So now that it's finally done, no spoilers by the way, how do I feel about Frierin's second season? Number 1, I'm very happy. I think it was absolutely a success. Number 2, while it reached similar peaks, the average quality and floor I think lowered a bit. In my opinion, season 1 was just higher quality. But number 3, this was an incredibly challenging thing to set out to do. Something that is often brushed over by people, me included, is the difficulty of adaptation. A majority of anime is adapting video games, light novels, or especially manga. And while one of the benefits of adaptation is already having source material, one of the deficits is already having source material. You have to work with what you got. And as I was watching season 2, I would read along with the manga after I finished each episode, and I think they were able to get a lot out of the source material. People for years now have been telling me how excited they are to see certain arcs adapted. So the same thing that's going to really help season 3, great source material, also made the second season a bit awkward and difficult to navigate. And how much you step away and add to that source material is often determined by the initial running of a show. Season 1 has more flexibility because you can set the tone. Frierin's second season didn't have that luxury. There's now established expectations from manga readers, as well as the need to emulate an incredibly polished and unique style. Frieren season 1 in a lot of ways didn't feel like other anime. But with the director, Keiichiro Saito, stepping down and a bunch of other changes behind the scenes, even partially living up to the hype was going to be a challenge. All of this is why I think, especially in retrospect, it was such a good decision to do a 10-episode season. Something I argued in previous weeks as the show was airing was that despite our limited perspective, the people making decisions involving Frierin's second season were working with tons of specific information. Things like currently being in an indefinite hiatus due to health concerns for the mangaka and artist, figuring out the general pacing for the following arcs and how they want to tackle it, and ultimately giving themselves flexibility to make adjustments. I think the way they approach season 2 has put the team behind Frieren in a fantastic position for the third season. They just went through an entire production cycle, have room to make adjustments. They've partially broken away from that restrictive mold that I think the first season set. They also adapted what I would argue as a difficult set of source material. These specific chapters that made up season 2 were a lot of setup and transition. And yet they found tons of opportunities to get a lot of substance. Like I said earlier in this video, I think the peaks of this season were really fantastic, capturing the kind of X factor that I've become really attached to in watching Frieren, maintaining the soul of what makes it special. This is where I'm going to start getting into spoilers. If you'd like to avoid those, you can skip to this timestamp. There were some really clear standouts looking back on these 10 episodes. The Revolte arc was fantastic and definitely needed. I love when stories take a character I previously wrote off and make them significant, and Genau is a perfect example of that. A character people were very excited about, built around intrigue finally delivered in Methode, and all of this didn't impede on getting fantastic moments for both Fern and Stark. There are definitely some problems involving the importance and weight of that fight given Frieren stepping back like she has multiple times in the past. Her passive role created a bit of a dissonance involving Stark's almost death and the stakes of the fight. It kind of mixed the signals of what the audience was supposed to feel. You know, I like the way the Revolte arc played out, and I don't know how they could have gotten that with Frieren involved, especially given the fact that in the manga she takes a step back. But the story is ultimately more famous for its slice of life aspects, which worked well this season. We got an abundance of Himmel with a fantastic exclamation point in Frieren finding his journal. We developed the story, venturing deeper into the North. We saw characters continue to develop, even getting some progress on Stark and Fern's relationship. And this season in a lot of ways felt like a love letter to Stark. He's a character that at times in the first season was pushed to the side. A while back, I even made a video about that exact topic. And one of my favorite side characters in the story was introduced, the hero of the South, a character that very easily could have felt like a retconned loophole, but instead was fantastically charming with almost no screen time, one that added significantly to the lore and world that the story takes place in. Once again, capturing that fantastic feeling I got with Kraft and Zine, where their limited time in the story enhanced the impact they had on it. This second season checked a lot of the boxes I was hoping for. And making something like this is so much harder than people can imagine. Living up to the expectations set by the first season was already a challenge enough. Successfully adapting and adding to what many would consider to be the weakest part of the manga so far, all while dealing with an entirely new structure for production, it's very impressive. But it wasn't without fault. I think there were noticeable dips in quality control. I mean, take for example this shot where Aizen is doing a single pinky handstand, where his cape is being affected by gravity, but his beard and kind of the rest of his clothes isn't. It's something I can't really remember ever seeing in the first season despite rewatching it many times. And that kind of represents an overarching feeling I had a lot during this season, moments that disrupted my immersion that felt uncharacteristic of the first season. However, they succeeded in what I consider to be most important. They maintained the central tone of the story. They managed and overcame incredible challenges and having so much shift behind the scenes. They set themselves up beautifully for one of the most anticipated manga arcs I've seen in a while. For years now, as I've been doing this series, people have been saying, just you wait. And they got us there in a way that felt really satisfying, albeit, from my perspective, not as polished. But looking in retrospect at the way they approached this season makes me very confident in their future. If this had been a normal 28 episode season, they would have had to dedicate a lot of time and attention to the upcoming arc. And I think these 10 episodes we got would have been rushed, more would have fallen through the cracks, there would have been less resources to dedicate to them. They set up a situation where they could make the best 10 episode transition they could. And it really worked out well. The third season being announced the same day that the last episode of season 2 aired is really interesting. I can't remember a time where I've seen a show do that before. Frierin's first season started airing in late September of 2023, with the second season being aired in January of 2026. That's just over a 2-year gap. So we're seeing a little bit of an increase in pace between seasons. A big question mark is how many episodes does the third season plan to be? Are they going to come back to 10 episodes again, or is it going to be longer? My personal guess is that the 10 episode season had more to do with the source material than anything else, meaning that I think the third season is ultimately going to be determined by the Golden Land arc. I think all of this indicates direct intention. Madhouse seems to have a game plan, which makes me happy. I think they're setting themselves up for success. Being creatives in such a difficult industry leads to a lot of hard decisions, and I'm really starting to trust the people making those decisions with Frieren. So now we're left with a couple major question marks. The first, most obvious one being, will Keiichiro Saito come back and direct? His involvement in the second season, despite stepping back, indicates that I think he still wants to be part of this project. In reality, most of us have zero insight to what's going on behind the scenes, but personally, I'm a huge fan of his directing style. I think he's one of the best in the industry. But that being said, season 2 proved that his involvement is not a necessity for quality. Tomio Kitagawa, who took over the directing in season 2, I think had an incredibly difficult job of stepping into another director's shoes. In an interview with Saito and Kitagawa, there's a lot of praise thrown both ways, as well as tons of acknowledgement of just how much pressure they were functioning under. So I think my final takeaway is that this season was a complete success in what it needed to do. It beautifully set up one of the most beloved arcs in the manga. It successfully transitioned from one production team to another, and it did all of this in an incredibly reasonable amount of time. Not only from season 1 to season 2, but also based on the announcement when we'll be getting the third. So thank you for those who've been watching along with me as season 2 has aired. I appreciate the support for the 12 videos I've done so far, and I'm excited to talk more about Frierin's second season in the future. The series is the foundation of my career. So thank you for going on this journey with me. What'd you think of season 2? I'll catch y'all later.